David listened to my pitch, nodded along, then said, "That's cute, but maybe you should focus on something more realistic. Community centers don't really advance careers, do they?" He said it with such casual certainty that I found myself doubting. Maybe he was right. He'd been in the industry longer. 6 months later, when I did land a legitimate commercial project, a boutique hotel renovation, David's response was different. "They only hired you because you're a woman," he said, not even looking up from his phone. Diversity quota. When I protested, he sighed like I was being difficult. "I'm just being realistic, Sarah." "Someone has to be." The comments multiplied. My designs were trying too hard. My presentations were a little much. When I worked late, I was neglecting family. When I didn't work late, I was not serious about my career. Every opinion I offered at family gatherings was subtly corrected, redirected, or dismissed. David's mother would smile and say things like, "Well, Sarah has her own way of seeing things," in that tone that made it clear my way was wrong. But it was always wrapped in concern. In helpfulness. In love. Then Mia was born, and for a while, everything got better. David was wonderful with our daughter. Attentive, proud, involved. I cut back on work not because he asked, but because I wanted to. Because being a mother was everything I'd hoped it would be. Diane praised me for finally getting priorities straight. I ignored the sting in that compliment. Mia was 3 when I took on a small residential project, just to keep my skills fresh. The client loved it. I won a local design award. I came home glowing with the news, and David congratulated me. Then, privately, he said, "I hope this doesn't go to your head. It's a local award, Sarah. Not exactly the Pritzker Prize." By the time Mia was 5, I'd stopped sharing my successes. By the time she was 7, I'd learned that the safest response to most things was silence. Not because David yelled, he rarely raised his voice. But because his words had this way of making me feel so small, so foolish, that it was easier to just not try. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I leave? Trust me. I asked myself that question every single day. But here's what people who haven't lived it don't understand. Emotional abuse doesn't feel like abuse when you're in it. It feels like truth. Like maybe you really are oversensitive. Maybe you really do misunderstand things. Maybe you're lucky anyone puts up with you at all. And there was Mia. Beautiful, bright Mia, with David's green eyes, and my stubborn streak. He never said anything cruel in front of her. Never. In public, at family gatherings, around our daughter, David was perfect. Supportive husband. Doting father. Diane would look at us and say, "You two are what marriage should be." And part of me, a larger part than I want to admit, wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe that I was the problem, because if I was the problem, then I could fix it. But Mia noticed things. Kids always do. She was 8 when she asked me, "Mom, why does Dad always sound annoyed when you talk about your work?" I laughed it off, said she was imagining things. But her eyes held mine with this intensity that made me look away. At 9, she stopped telling David about her art projects. Just stopped. When I asked why, she shrugged and said, "He always finds something wrong with them." My heart broke, but I told myself it was just constructive criticism. That David wanted her to improve. I was 33 when things escalated. I'd been working on the biggest project of my career, a proposal to redesign the lobby and event space of a historic building downtown. It was a competitive bid, 6 firms presenting. I'd poured everything into it. The research. The renderings. The model I built by hand because I wanted them to see the vision in 3 dimensions. It was beautiful. Innovative. Exactly what they needed. David knew how much this meant to me. For once, he seemed supportive. He even suggested I present my work at his mother's upcoming birthday party. "The Hendersons will be there," he said. "John Henderson sits on the building committee. It could be good networking." I should have known better. Diane's 65th birthday party was at Meridian, the most expensive restaurant in our city. The kind of place with pressed white tablecloths and a sommelier who acts like wine is a religion. 40 people. All of David's family, their friends. His business associates. I wore a navy dress that Diane had once complimented. I brought the model carefully wrapped in protective cloth. I thought I was being strategic. Professional. Mia came with us, of course. She wore her favorite purple dress and carried her small crossbody bag, an old tablet case she'd repurposed to hold her sketchbook and colored pencils. She was always drawing, always observing. That night, she was quieter than usual. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Champagne toasts. Stories about Diane's life. David was charming, attentive to his mother, friendly to everyone. He introduced me to the Hendersons, mentioned my project. Sarah's up for a big contract, he said with a proud smile. Maybe she'll show you her little model later. Little model. Not innovative design. Not months of work. Little model. But I smiled. Of course, I smiled. Dinner was served. Conversations flowed. Diane opened gifts, expensive jewelry from Marcus and Victoria, a cruise package from David's aunt, wine from various guests. Then David stood up with his own gift, and everyone applauded. It was a custom-made photo album, beautifully bound, filled with family pictures. Diane cried. Everyone cooed. It was perfect. Then David turned to the table and said, "Actually, while we're all here, Sarah wanted to show everyone something she's been working on." His voice was bright, encouraging. "Bring out your project, honey." My stomach dropped. Something in his tone. Something in his smile. But everyone was looking at me with polite interest. The Hendersons were nodding encouragingly. So I carefully unwrapped the model and placed it on the table near Diane. It was a scale replica of the building's interior, every detail of my redesign rendered in careful precision. The open flow layout. The natural lighting features. The way I'd preserved historical elements while modernizing the space. "This is lovely," Mrs. Henderson said, leaning in. "Is this the Morrison Building project?" Before I could answer, David laughed. Not cruelly. Just amused. "Sarah's been working on this for months. Months. Tell them about your concept, honey. The one where you want to basically gut a historic building?" "I'm not gutting it," I said carefully. "I'm preserving the historical integrity while—" Right, David interrupted, still smiling. "By tearing out the original layout." He turned to John Henderson. "John, you were saying earlier how important it is to maintain historical authenticity in downtown renovations. What do you think about completely removing load-bearing walls in a 1,922nd structure?" That's not what I was doing. He knew that. But the way he said it, with such casual confidence, made it sound absurd. John Henderson frowned slightly. "Well, that would be concerning. I'm not removing load-bearing walls," I said, my voice tighter. "I'm working with the existing structure. The plans clearly show." "The plans," David said, and laughed again. He picked up his wine glass. "Sarah, honey, your model is adorable. Really. But let's be honest with everyone here. This isn't going to happen. The committee isn't going to choose a design that fundamentally misunderstands the building's historical value. You do understand that, right?" The table had gone quiet. Not shocked quiet. Just awkward quiet. The kind where people don't know whether to intervene or pretend they didn't hear. "David," I said quietly. "This isn't the time or place. I'm just trying to save you embarrassment," he said, and his voice was so kind, so concerned. "You've put all this work into something that was never realistic. Someone has to tell you." He looked around the table, seeking validation. "I mean, she doesn't even have formal engineering training. She's an architect, not a structural engineer. There's a difference." Diane patted my hand. "David's just looking out for you, dear. He knows this industry. Maybe he could help you revise your ideas into something more feasible. Something more feasible." As if I were a child playing pretend. I felt heat rising in my face. "I have worked with structural engineers. Every single aspect of this design has been reviewed and approved by whom?" David asked, eyebrows raised. "Because I asked around, Sarah. I called some people. No one has any record of you consulting with certified engineers on this." He was lying. I knew he was lying. But he said it with such confidence, such certainty, that I saw doubt flicker across faces around the table. That's not true, I whispered. Sarah. David's voice dropped, became gentle. Sad, even. Honey, I know this project means a lot to you. But you have to be realistic. You're competing against firms with decades of experience. National reputations. I'm trying to help you avoid disappointment. You're trying to humiliate me, I said, louder than I meant to. The table went completely silent. David's expression shifted. Hurt. Confused. Like I'd slapped him. I'm trying to protect you, he said quietly. I'm trying to keep you from embarrassing yourself in front of actual professionals. But fine. If you want to learn the hard way, he reached for the model. Don't, I said, standing up, reaching for it. But he was faster. He picked up the model, held it up to the light. Look at this, everyone. Months of work. And you know what? It is impressive. For a hobby project. Then, as if by accident, but I knew, God, I knew it wasn't an accident, his other hand bumped his wine glass. Red wine splashed across the model. Across the white foam board. Across the tiny paper trees I'd hand cut. The liquid soaked in immediately, warping everything. Oh no, David said, and his eyes were wide with mock horror. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I lunged for the model, trying to save it, but the wine had already ruined it. The paper peeled. The glue dissolved. 3 months of work destroyed in seconds. It's just wine, Diane said quickly. It can be cleaned. Or rebuilt. Sarah, it's just a model. Don't overreact. But I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I stared at the ruins of my work, at David's concerned face, at everyone looking at me like I was the one making a scene. I need to go, I managed to say. Sarah, come on, David said, reaching for my arm. Don't leave like this. I made a mistake. I said I was sorry. Why are you always so dramatic about everything? And that's when Mia stood up. My 10-year-old daughter, who had been sitting quietly sketching in her little notebook throughout dinner, stood up from her chair with something in her hands. Not her sketchbook. My old smartphone, the one I thought I'd lost months ago. I recorded all of it, she said. 5 words. Clear as a bell in that silent restaurant. David froze. His hand still on my arm. His face still arranged in that expression of concerned confusion. What? He said. Mia held up the phone. Her hand was steady. Her voice was steadier. I recorded all of it. Everything you said to Mom. For 52 days. Miss Chen helped me organize the files. The silence that fell over that table wasn't awkward anymore. It was absolute. Mia, David said, his voice still calm but with an edge now. What are you talking about? Put that phone away. I recorded you telling Mom she was stupid for thinking she could redesign the Morrison building, Mia said. Her young voice carried across the restaurant. Other tables were starting to look over. I recorded you saying her design was trash. I recorded you calling the committee members to tell them Mom didn't understand structural integrity. I recorded you telling Mom she should just give up and focus on being a wife. I recorded you saying she embarrasses you. I recorded you. That's enough, David snapped, reaching for the phone. But Mia stepped back, and suddenly, my father, who I hadn't even realized had come to the party, was standing beside her. Retired Judge Robert Mitchell, still imposing at 71. Don't. My father said quietly. Don't touch her. I stared at my father, then at Mia. How, when did you? I started recording after that night. He made you cry about the Henderson contract, Mia said, looking at me. You thought I was asleep, but I heard him. I heard him say you'd never amount to anything. That you were wasting everyone's time. That he only married you because you seemed manageable. Her voice cracked slightly. Mom. I heard him. And I knew if I told you, you wouldn't believe me. So I started recording. Miss Chen said documentation was important. My art teacher. Mia's art teacher, Miss Chen. I looked at Mia in shock, and she nodded. I told her what was happening. She believed me. She helped me organize the recordings by date. She said I needed to be safe, so I only recorded when Dad didn't know I was around. She said. Mia's voice wavered for the first time. She said sometimes adults need proof before they'll protect kids. David's face had gone white. Not pale. White. This is insane, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked around the table, seeking support. She's 10 years old. She doesn't understand what she's hearing. I was trying to help Sarah see things realistically. You told the Morrison Building Committee that Mom plagiarized her design, Mia said flatly. I have that recording too. From last week when you thought you were alone in your office. The table erupted. Not in David's defense. In shock. In questions. In accusations. You did what? John Henderson stood up, his face red. You called and said her design was derivative? That was you? Marcus was staring at his brother. David. What the hell? But David was looking at me now, and for the first time in 7 years, I saw something in his face that wasn't calm control. It was panic. Sarah, you know I love you. I was protecting you. The competition is brutal. I didn't want you to get hurt. You sabotaged her bid? John Henderson's voice rose. Are you out of your mind? Do you know the legal implications? I recorded that too, Mia said. He called it saving Sarah from herself. He told Mr. Henderson that Mom was having some kind of mental health crisis, and the design wasn't even really hers. He said she looked down at the phone, scrolling. He said she'd probably cry and blame him when she didn't get the contract, and he needed to manage the fallout. Diane stood up, her face ashen. David, tell me she's lying. But David couldn't speak. He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing, while 52 days of careful cruelty played out in our daughter's evidence. My father's voice cut through the chaos. I've already forwarded copies to the appropriate authorities, he said calmly. Professional misconduct, ethics violations, and potential fraud, given that you misrepresented yourself as calling on behalf of your wife. The Bar Association will be interested, so will the Real Estate Licensing Board. David whirled on my father. You knew about this? Mia came to me 2 weeks ago, my father said. With Miss Chen. They wanted legal advice about how to document abuse. So I've been helping them. Making sure everything was admissible. Making sure it was done right. He looked at David with something cold in his eyes. You made a mistake, son. You underestimated how much your daughter loves her mother. And you underestimated what people will do to protect children who ask for help. The restaurant manager appeared, clearly sensing the situation had spiraled beyond a family disagreement. Perhaps you'd like to continue this discussion elsewhere? But there was nothing more to discuss. I looked at David, my husband, the father of my child, the man I'd spent 7 years doubting myself for, and I felt nothing. No anger. No love. Just a strange, clear certainty. We're leaving, I said quietly. I picked up what remained of my wine-soaked model. Mia, get your bag. Sarah, wait, David said. Desperation creeping into his voice. You can't just. We need to talk about this. Privately. Like adults. Like adults? I turned to face him. David. I am an adult. I have always been an adult. I'm just sorry it took me this long to remember that. We left. My father, my daughter, and me. Behind us, I could hear arguing. Diane's voice, high and defensive. Marcus demanding answers. David trying to spin it, to explain it away. Let them argue. I was done. The next 3 months were a blur of lawyers and court dates and protective orders. The recordings were devastating. Not because they showed physical abuse, there was none, but because they showed pattern. Premeditation. Systematic undermining. In one particularly damning recording, David joked to his brother that he'd married an architect so she'd always have a project to fail at and keep her busy enough not to notice how much freedom he had. His real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Several clients dropped him when the story broke. Turns out people don't like doing business with someone who interferes with his wife's career. His reputation, the thing he'd cared about more than anything, was in shambles. The Morrison Building Committee called me. Apologized profusely. Said they'd been given false information. Asked if I'd still be willing to present. I presented. They chose my design. But the best part? The part that still makes me smile? It was what Mia said when the divorce was finalized and David was facing ethics violations, and my father asked her if she understood how brave she'd been. I wasn't brave, Mia said, matter of fact. Miss Chen told me that standing up to bullies isn't brave. It's just necessary. Brave is what Mom was. She kept going even when he tried to make her stop. She kept believing in herself even when everyone told her not to. I just gave her proof. She did the hard part. I'm rebuilding my practice now. Slowly. Carefully. With Mia watching me sketch designs at the kitchen table, asking questions about load-bearing walls and historical preservation and why adults sometimes believe lies more easily than truth. Last week, she asked if I was afraid of dating again someday. I told her the truth. I'm not afraid of anything anymore. Fear requires uncertainty. And I'm certain now. Certain of my worth. Certain of my talent. Certain that anyone who tries to make me small isn't worthy of my time. Good, she said. And went back to her own drawing a portrait of the two of us, standing together, for her art class. At the bottom, in her careful handwriting, she'd written, warriors. Miss Chen was right about one thing. Documentation matters. But what she didn't tell Mia, what I hope my daughter learns on her own, is that sometimes the most important record isn't the one on a phone or in a courtroom. It's the one you keep in your heart. The record of every time you chose yourself. Every time you stood up. Every time you refused to be made smaller. I'm keeping that record now. And it's not little. It's not cute. It's not manageable. It's everything.